Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. What's a COVID-era trend and what's here to stay? Amar is the Senior Director in Consulting at the market research company Kantar. As a retail consultant who specializes in macroeconomics and forecasting, Amar has invaluable insights on the past, present, and future impacts of the pandemic. At the post-COVID intersection of acceleration and disruption, Amar fleshes out the trends that all retailers should be keeping their eyes on. In this episode of the Voice of Retail podcast, I'm thrilled to sit down with my longtime friend Amar to talk about supply chain disruption, how AI in the retail space is too focused on the past, and what the return to normal timeline really looks like.
Yeah, I think what the era has done really is accelerated some of the trends they were forming pre-COVID, such as e-com. We would have been here 5 years from now if there were no COVID. But I think what COVID did, it really encouraged and actually forced in many ways retailers to be more omnipresent and focus more on the supply chain. And the one thing that most retailers learned is that AI doesn't work.
Let's listen in now. Amar, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, my friend. How are you doing?
Hi, Michael. I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I should say welcome back. This is your second appearance. You were on with my my prior format, I should say, when I had two guests in an episode. You joined me on the episode where I had Michael Snyder from Bunnings in Australia just to talk about your analysis of the hardware industry. I thought it was a nice combo. But now in 2021, I do these great solo episodes. So I'm so thrilled to have you back on the mic and spend some time with you and get your perspectives on what on earth has been going on. And what can retailers look forward to? So thanks again for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure as always. And thank you for inviting back. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start with, I know a bit about you, but I probably don't know as much about you. Let's start with a little bit about you. Now, you and I have a couple of intersection points in our career. First of all, at Guelph, you worked with or studied with, or I think he was on your dissertation, Sylvain Charlebois, my podcast partner on The Food Professor. And we worked together for a big Canadian conglomerate in very different roles, though, Rogers Communications. So that's a fun part of your background. So start with that a little bit. You've got not just an analyst, not just a rigger, but you also have got some creative chops to you. Tell us all about a little bit about that, because that's really amazing, and who you are, what you do, where you got to, and what you do at Kantar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had, when I was doing my master's at the University of Guelph, and I did my master's in market research. And while I was doing that, there was an opportunity at CBC's Hockey Night in Canada to start the Punjabi broadcast. And my friend and I, we were one of the first commentators to kick it off, and also did a bit of the same Punjabi commentating for the Toronto Raptors back in the day as well. So yeah, so that was good times.
That's really taken off, right? I mean, that's really become quite a great institution.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very proud of the legacy, actually. Mm-hmm. So I called a couple of games. Well, I called a game 2 years ago. Last year we couldn't do it. I usually call playoffs now, but I called the Leafs and the Sens series a couple of years ago, the first round of playoffs. So that was fun. But yeah, no, it's great. And I know my ex-colleagues, and they're still my friends, so great job with Hockey Night in Canada. And the broadcast now is owned by Rogers now and so these guys done a great job expanding it and bringing more people, and also the talent is just fantastic. One of my ex-colleagues, her Narayan, is now on the mainstream English broadcast, so he's been calling the NHL playoff games now. So super proud of him as well.
Let's talk about Kantar, and you already talked about deep experience in research, but how did you find your way into this business? Were you the guy in the sandbox with your fellow students, asking them questions about what their thoughts were about the latest snacks, or were you always interested in insights and research? Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I did my bachelor's in marketing, I was always more of a fact and evidence-based guy. So the natural progression for me in terms of my academics was a degree in MS Marketing Science and Consumer Research, which I did at Guelph. And after that, I joined Kantar Insights, which used to be Legacy Millward Brown. So I worked with Millward Brown and cut my teeth there in brand and marketing, advertising, tracking, as well as brand tracking and copy testing. Then I worked at Kraft Heinz Canada as a brand manager and consumer insights manager. And then, I was a consultant at heart. So there was an opportunity at Kantar Consulting with the retail division. And I embraced that about 3 years ago. So I'm back with Kantar about for 3 years. And I lead the Canadian retail portfolio as well as health and wellness portfolio for entire North America, as well as home improvement. So those are the three pods that I own here at Kantar.
All right. Well, tell us about Kantar. Tell us all about that organization and what you do and your scope. Big global scope. Does some amazing work, but tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. Kantar is in about 90 countries, and we specialize in brand and advertising. Kantar used to be owned by WPP. We still have WPP as a minority stakeholder. And as we all know, WPP has most of the advertising, all the successful advertising firms under its umbrella. So a big global, reach, big global footprint for Kantar, especially in my division. We do insights for brand tracking and copy testing and all brand related research. But we have different verticals within the consulting division where retail is one of them. Then there's a division that works in futures. They've been running their service for more than 40 years in different countries. And basically what they look into the attitudes and behavior shifts in all these countries and see, like the shopping behaviors, how's that changing, political awareness, like how, the attitudinal shifts when it comes to race relations and what have you. So there's a plethora of different attitudes and behaviors these guys they track. And then we have a brand and marketing consulting division that focuses purely on brand building and brand repositioning. But in my division, the division I represent in retail, we look into the macroeconomic forces that are impacting retail, channel level data, retail level trends, as well as omni-commerce expansion. The big part of what we do is we do sales forecasting for all major retailers in North America, including the top Canadian retailers, as well as, tier B retailers, as we call them, the smaller retailers. Right. We look at their sales footprint, number of store counts, and how their offline and online sales are going to shape up in the next few years based on our frameworks and methodology. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, right on. And we'd be remiss in not mentioning your partner and my friend and friend of the industry, David Marquette, who is not able to join us, but will be back on the Voice of Retail with a solo. He was actually my first guest on the Food Professor podcast, so real great insights into food and grocery and all great things. So
absolutely.
Thinking of him today as well. So let's jump in. So, as someone steeped in analysis and observation and analytics, you must have had a fascinating look at the COVID era. Looking at the COVID era, and I keep saying looking back at the COVID era. I mean, I think, we could see the end zone, the goalposts keep moving a little bit, but certainly in the US, they're moving out of it with the double shots. You and I were talking off mic, we both had ours, and, it takes 2 shots to open the economy. Canada's behind the US, but we can see the end zone, right? So the COVID era, 18 months, 20 months by the time it's done. What are your observations about the industry and consumer behavior? And when we look back, you and I are sitting 2 years from today together, having a beverage. When we look back and say, this is the things that define that era, what in your mind today jumps out?
Yeah, I think what the era has done really is accelerated some of the trends they were forming pre-COVID, such as e-com. We would have been here 5 years from now if there were no COVID. But I think what COVID did, it really encouraged and actually forced in many ways retailers to be more omnipresent and focus more on the supply chain. And the one thing that most retailers learned is that AI doesn't work. Artificial intelligence, all the technological things, they really don't work.
It can't predict stuff like, it's a great point because how AI is such a wonderful prediction engine, but it takes inputs of the past and there's been nothing like what we've been through, right?
Absolutely. So, and that's what Dave's Dave Marquette, you mentioned, he brings that up several times. It's the AI and all those tools are effective as long as there is no disruption. But when disruption hits, is our agility, the way you go about, your fundamentals of your business, they are very important. The one thing that really came out of the COVID-19, the third thing I would say would be the emphasis on your people. your employees and your people assets, the human resources. This is all about them. Like, you need their partnership. You need to look out for them to build a strong team and build a strong company. Right. So all those things were really important. I think these are the key lessons that we learned is, you got to be omnipresent. That's where the future is going to be. No one's going to, stop working and stop, buying in store. In-store retailing is important, but the convenience aspect of getting some of your routine shopping done through online channels is going to stick. And on top of that, you got to take care of your people. Your employees are your front. They are your most important touch points with your clients and your consumers. So make sure you take care of them. Lastly, you got to be thoughtful of how you design your supply chain. You just know just in time did not work this time around, right? So it's just have that buffer and have the contingency plans. And that's very important for retailers to consider as they navigate the next few years.
Well, in fact, perhaps one of the lingering impacts of the COVID era is just to touch on supply chain. I mean, right now it is just jammed at every single node. I mean, in the paper today, we're talking on Friday in the paper today in the Globe Mail, they're talking about, a drought in the St. Lawrence is increasing. Like it seems, it's going sideways, both literally and figuratively in a number of different ways. What are retailers telling you about how they're dealing with it and how they see it on a go forward basis? I hear a lot of talk about we need to be more agile. As you said, it's difficult to predict. So let's not try to be to the button forecast. Let's try to build agility. That's easier said than done, right?
Absolutely. And it's a long-term commitment, right? So the one thing what we've learned from this experience, what retailers are telling us, they're taking more ownership of the supply chain. We saw with Home Depot, you may have read about this. Yeah. Home Depot, they chartered or they had their containers coming directly to them.
Isn't it crazy? They're big enough to I was joking with one of them was someone from Home Depot was on a live stream with me. And I'm like, man, you guys are going to need a bigger boat once everybody wants to take some of the space. They want to rent it from you. You get into a whole different business, for God's sake. You got your own boat. Wow.
Well, it comes with a lot of risk, and there are benefits, obviously. You have more control over your supply chain, but the risk is like, once you lose that shipment, if God forbid it sinks, then, your whole season supply is gone, right? And then, so there are some inherent risks in that, but I think the long-term commitment is going to be finding local partners, local vendors, and trying to bring those costs down through a private label expansion, through collaboration, what have you. I think those things will be key.
You think that's realistic? I mean, I know that's an ambition, but can we outperform manufacturing? It's a long way away, but can we ever outperform in Canada particularly, but even in North America, the manufacturing scale and scope and flexibility of China?
I would say in certain categories, yes. Okay. We talk about lumber. I mean, we're the biggest suppliers in the world by far, right? Sure. And that is something that's driving inflation throughout. As you know, in the housing market in the U.S., the average cost of building a house is upwards of $200,000 for where we were pre-pandemic.
Crazy.
And most of it's, maybe all of it's, really coming from commodities, right? So, and then if we can have some kind of value add to those things at home with the help of technology and people, I think we should be able to find that mix. At the end of the day, we still need to employ people, right? The employment's got to surge somehow. And if you are having all those things done at home, that'll be good. At least you have more control over supply chain, right? Yeah. Maybe not 100%, but there should be some fraction of that that's going to come onshore again.
It's funny. When I was talking to a bunch of retailers, they might say, listen, I can shift my manufacturing here. But what they found during the pandemic was it was always the last weak link. In other words, the cap on the bottle, the label on the bottle, the corrugate, like it was all the different various components. Even if it was being made here, it's such a gnarly challenge, right?
It is. And so far, we do depend on other countries and other suppliers to provide us all those things, right? So, I mean, this is, like I said, it's a long-term commitment. It's something that, retailers will start thinking about it. And if you think about it in the U.S., Michael, the biggest importers in the country are Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Ashley's Furniture, right? I mean, their furniture clients right now, they're reeling with supply issues, and that's why the furniture costs have gone up tremendously, even in this country. So,
and now the tariffs, these new tariffs have kicked in Canada. These punitive tariffs around imports from I think Vietnam and from other Southeast Asian countries, just double, triple digit, quadruple digit tariffs. Just to kind of, I know Pallister out of Winnipeg's trying to level. Their argument is they're trying to level the playing field, but I think retailers are saying, yeah, but you don't have the capacity to meet our demand. So we're at a rock and a hard place, right?
Absolutely. And we're going to see it across all the other categories too, right? And there was something that happened tremendously in the last decade, or well, I'd say a couple of decades, when most of the shoes and apparel were made in Mexico, Haiti, Honduras, and the Caribbean. And then there was a gradual shift of that to the Far East, especially South Korea. And now basically all your shoes are made in Vietnam and China. So it's been a gradual shift offshore, but I think that's where it is. Like, there's a dynamics at play where there's concentration of clothing and apparel and those markets. And somehow we need to bring it a little closer to home to make sure we can, have a seamless supply chain to some extent. But again, it'll be category specific. Yeah. It will not happen overnight, maybe not even next year, but eventually there'll be some push to bring it onshore.
Yeah. How long do you think this is going to go on for? I mean, right now the supply chain is, I see nothing but more trouble, because as some commodities wane, like furniture and things like that, as the economy opens up, people go back to work and start getting together, apparel sales, which have been just decimated, will start to pick up, and that will create more challenges. But are you more optimistic, or when do you think the supply chain will kind of level itself out based on what we know today?
Yeah, the way things are looking right now, Michael, I think we're looking in early 2022 when things will be back to normal. This will be a chaotic year. It's not even getting stuff from the other countries to our shores. It's basically even getting it through from the port to the stores and distribution centers. The trucking, both in the U.S. and Canada, we have a shortage of about 20% truckers right now. Yeah. So that is actually, as a matter of fact, the reason why gas prices are up is not because of supply chain issues. It's because there are not enough truckers to haul the oil from the refineries to our gas stations. So I mean, so those pressures are going to exist. And there's labor shortages in the U.S. now. People are not going back to retail or leisure or restaurants. They've found other ways of employment. And that's going to be another added pressure throughout the industry. So there will be some challenges in the next foreseeable future. I think it's going to take at least 7 to 8 months, provided there are no other aggressive variants that we find that's going to get us back into lockdowns again. We're thinking about 6 to 7 months. And that could also be delayed given the resurgence of COVID in some of those developing markets as well.
Yeah, I was reading there's an outbreak in South China that is further delaying some of the ports and movements. I mean, this thing is not over, right? I mean, it's funny. We're kind of acting like the COVID era is over. But in fact, I think I said that. But really globally, it's far from over. I mean, this could be a couple of years before things get back to whatever normal looks like. Okay, so let's talk about grocery. So you guys do a lot of work in the grocery space. The grocers on the whole have been the recipient of a huge tailwind as consumers and restaurants, unfortunately, our friends in food service had to shut down and remain closed, phenomenally lost an entire year of business for some of them, some formats. But the grocers have been the net recipient of that. What are your thoughts on, as inevitably that volume starts to ebb off, as people start to regain their lives? I know grocers are keen to figure out how to hold on to as many of those new customers and to build those new lines of thinking, build new extensions, get people to think of them as the place to do takeout. And what's your view on the industry, where it's heading, and the optimistic or realistic assessment of that?
In our assessments, Michael, what we're seeing is there'll be some stickiness to people's purchasing behaviors right now. There will be some things they've learned to love to do as a family, and that's cooking is one of them. Mm-hmm. The whole family gets involved, but eventually when people are going to get back to the offices and their daily jobs, there'll be time constraints, takeout, and all those options going to look lucrative. There's some traction that retailers have found with the meal order kits. But again, you still got to prepare them. And that's the pain point that we're hearing from a lot of clients that, and
they're not a lot of, and they're a tough business to make money in, right? Because there's a lot of work, a lot of customer churn. Meal kits are a tough business, right?
And on top of that's wastage. If you don't find, if you don't sell them, you gotta recycle them or just basically toss them out. And that's, again, like the margins are very thin on those.
Yeah.
But when the disposable income is going to be spent on entertainment and tourism and some of the other avenues which have been flowing into retail, there will be some, tapering off of those dollars from grocers. So there will be some softness,
right.
But I think grocers have learned how to engage shoppers through their loyalty programs and personalization initiatives. So I think some of that stickiness is going to stay. Some of those, habits are probably going to prevail for the next foreseeable future. But eventually, this is all depends on the intensity of the strength of the programs and, how the new habits are going to stick for how long. That's going to define how the grocery volumes are going to be administered in the near future. That said, the double and triple digit category growth that some of our CPG clients have seen are probably not sustainable. And I think, for them to plan that out for the next few quarters is going to be unrealistic. So that's a heads up that we often give to our clients.
What do you think about consumers and their behavior? I mean, in the before time, we used to say it takes, some amount of time or weeks to develop new habits. We've definitely all as consumers have tried new brands, tried new retailers, developed new habits. You talked about more dining at home, whether we wanted to or not, staycations. Any ideas about the consumer behaviors that might stick? I mean, we could talk about e-commerce, for example. We could talk about how they shop or where they shop. Anything you think has really changed from behavior, or will it all just regress to the mean phenomenally after 18 months of this weirdness? Is it going to go back to normal? Is there a new normal?
This is a very fair question. And Michael, I must say that we'll be doing another Canadian retail conference in September. And these are the questions we've just fielded right now. So we're going to have more evidence-based results later on this summer to present at the conference in September. However, that said, some of the preliminary data that I've seen so far, we see that e-commerce is going to stick. We see e-commerce as tremendously notably increased versus pre-COVID. However, compared to a year ago when we were in the lockdowns in Q1 of last year versus Q1 of this year, we see that, the demand for e-commerce has tapered off. Consumers are still going back to stores. They're going back to the physical store. That said, e-commerce is definitely going to gradually get a greater share of retail dollars, right? We're saying, last time we spoke, and I remember you came to our conference last year, you said it's about 10%, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is going to eventually get to about 15% in the next 3 or 4 years.
You don't think it's there already? I mean, I was looking at some, it's funny, right? Because as you say, that the literally billions of dollar question is, where does the waterline reset itself? Have we moved ahead a couple of years? Is it of core retail? I mean, I've been calling it about 12 to 15% now, but do you think it's not there yet? Do you think after all this, do you think it's greater? Where do you think it is today? And I guess, as you say, when the stores open up, it's going to ebb off a bit, but where do you think it's going to set out for 2021?
Yeah, when we look at our penetration data for online retail and, across the board, across all channels and all major retailers, we saw a point of saturation in about Q2 of last year. So there was a surge in Q1 and Q2, it came down, and Q3 just went stable. Q4 and even Q1 of this year, they've been more or less at the same point, at the same level. So give or take, the lockdown restrictions and what have you, I think that was another propellant of that. What we think once, the two things that have happened, again, Michael, like, Walmart, Loblaws, everyone is going to remodel their stores. They want to, engage customers in the store with experience and the added value they're going to get from buying in store with better curation of products and more inspirational ideas. And that's something Canadian shoppers love. They dig that, in a less informal way. But the online experience is going to stay for convenience. We still know Canadians are sleep deprived and they just don't have enough time to do all their tasks. I mean, that is going to be outsourced for convenience. And that's why Subscribe and Save is such a big feature in Canada that consumers just love getting those repeat orders from Amazon and Walmart. right? And we over-index compared to the US, by the way, on that. So the limited capacity in stores, the restrictions, they fuel some of those e-commerce growth. But in the data, we do find that consumers still want to go back to the store. It's just we love shopping in store as Canadians, right? And maybe when it gets cold outside, your store becomes the wonderland, right? And that excites shoppers. So we still think physical store is going to be huge, but you cannot ignore the strength of e-commerce and acceleration of that channel. You must be prepared to be well placed in both of those platforms.
Well, it's a great segue or kickoff to my last question for you, which is what is it going to take for retailers to be remarkable, both in store and online? What are those things that they've learned? And as people come back to the stores, I worry sometimes they come back with enthusiasm because they haven't been there and they go, oh, this didn't change at all. And since I last saw it, I was expecting more. Or, yeah, this is amazing. This is exactly what I wanted. What would be your advice to retailers in terms of, as my podcast partner Steve Dennis says, be remarkable, like be that retailer where people come home and tell their friends about? What are those moving parts? What are those elements in your mind?
Yeah, I would say there are 4 things you got to be really, you got to have it locked. The first is experience in store. That has always been there. And this is something that shoppers expect of retailers. When they come to the store, there's got to be, the stock shelves, and the navigation should be simpler, and findability should be easy. They should be able to find the items they want to find. So the design is important. But on top of that is the element of surprise and delight that we get from our in-store shopping experience. That has to be there. When you go, you discover new items, and where they're placed, they're curated. That is going to stay there, and that's important. And that's what retailers should be paying attention to, either through personalization of different, because they have the data now. They know exactly who the shoppers are in the area, what they prefer, what they buy. And if you can move the right merchandise and customize the experience, that's great. And then so the next thing is your flexible fulfillment. You should be able to provide your shoppers the option of buying in store, but there's something they want to quickly buy. They should have the option of getting it delivered or picked up at store. So flexible fulfillment is the way to go. And I can emphasize enough how COVID has taught us that over the last 18 months or so. And lastly, supply chain. I mean, you need to have a rock solid supply chain. Your products and your brands must be there when you enter the store, because shoppers, once they see that you're not stocked, they go to another store, and that becomes their new habit, right? So there are loyalties, but they can be broken because everyone is not competing for the same dollar, right?
Yeah, that may be, like I said, that may be one of those legacies, right, where people tried new things they'd never done before and figured out, hey, I can go to 3 or 4 different places and be like, I've never stepped in this brand of store before, and I did during COVID because maybe they had in stock, maybe whatever the case, right? And I think that could be one of those longer lasting legacies. All right, well, listen, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I think we've just barely scratched the surface on the work that Kantar does. So where can listeners go to learn more about you and learn more about the work you do, and maybe see some of these great insights both around North America and globally?
Oh, absolutely. So you can go to Kantar.com. We do have some complimentary webinars that we run for our clients as well as everyone in the market. So we talk about emerging trends, macro as well as retail trends. Kantar.com would be a great source for that. KRIQ.com is our portal for the retail division. You can find more information about the thought leadership pieces that we write there, and also some of the upcoming events that we host. And so you can find my contact information from KRIQ, and you can get in touch with me. I'm happy to discuss how we can help our clients in the consulting capacity as well as syndicated products that we offer. But Michael, thank you so much again. It's always a pleasure to be here, and looking forward to another discussion with Dave when he's back. And and I saw that you got your second jab. So excellent. So I got you'll be bulletproof, and hopefully we can go to NRF again together someday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I'm kind of planning to be there in January. Actually, I just did an interview with Matt Shea from the NRF, and they're doing it. And they think there's lots of enthusiasm. They don't, they're not sure how many people from around the world will be there. That's yet to be seen, but I think it's exciting. Now, you just lastly, you mentioned an event coming up in September. Do you have dates for that you want to tell the people about?
Yeah, it's on the 15th of September. And this year, we used to host it in Toronto downtown every year, but I think this year, as well as last year, it's going to be virtual. So yeah, you can find more information on that on KRIQ. And yeah, if you could reach out to me on LinkedIn or so, we're happy to discuss more details about that event as well.
Well, wonderful. Well, Amar, thanks again for joining me on the Voice Retail podcast. Great to hear from you. Great to hear your voice. Look forward to seeing you in person real soon as this whole COVID stuff winds up and we get back to normal things and new normal life. And until then, continued success and have a wonderful and safe week ahead.
You as well, sir. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of LeBlanc Company Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.